Thank you for making the time this morning to come and hear our briefing. I guess before we start, I'd just like to first of all acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today, pay my respects to elders past and present. So the plan this morning is to spend 20 or 30 minutes, I guess, getting you across our program. So the broader program, what the objectives are, how technology fits with that, and then talk about a bit of the process about how we'd like to engage with you. So about 20 to 30 minutes, we'll take some time for questions at the end. We will send you the slides. We're recording this so you can have a look at this later as well too if you need to. I will stress that this is not part of a procurement process. This is not procurement. This is a way for us to understand the market, the solutions that are out there, to get your input, if you like, into how we should think about this, the outcomes and the problems we're trying to solve as Simone's about to go through. So this is not procurement. This is just a way to engage with you. We're going to get to procurement later. So I just wanted to make that absolutely clear up front, and we'll go through some details on that later. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Simone Walker. Simone is the Executive Director for the entire Safe Home for Life program. So Simone's going to take us through the first part of the agenda, which is giving us an overview of Safe Home for Life. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Greg. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Safe Home for Life, and if you've had much to do with government agencies, you'll know that sometimes we have titles that don't actually lend themselves to telling you what they are, and Safe Home for Life is one of those. So Safe Home for Life is actually a combination of things, and it's the term that we give to the child protection legislative reforms that have just come about. So they passed through Parliament this year in March, and they've just been proclaimed on the 29th of October. The principles behind the reform was really an opportunity to say that we want to focus on a number of things. Firstly, we want to emphasise parental accountability for the families that we work with in the community services space, families where there are cases of abuse and neglect, that we want to be really clear about where parental responsibility lies. The other thing that we wanted to do with the legislation is look closely at a child's experience of the out-of-home care system. So these are children who, in many cases, can no longer live with their own families and come into our system. And that the state says you may no longer live with your family. They may live with a grandparent, they may live with an aunt or with a foster carer. But what we know for these children is that their outcomes are much poorer than those of their peers who live with their own families. So the focus of the child protection legislative reform is thinking about permanency for these children. What is the best permanency option for this child that sits in front of me? And it goes to the individualised nature of how we're trying to approach this. That we are taking a very strong design perspective about the end user. Our end users are children and families. We want to be really clear that in every part of our system that we can see the experience of a child and the experience of a family, and that our systems directly relate to that. Because we want to think about information that is available for children, for families and for carers, as well as for our caseworkers to make really informed and timely decisions. So that's the sort of system that we're building and the sort of legislation that we have brought into place. The other part of Safe Home for Life was a very exciting announcement in June of an additional $500 million in the Family and Community Services budget that lasts over 4 years. A very significant injection of funds in a climate that is not actually often about a significant injection of funds. So of course what comes with very large dollars is very, very large accountability. And we have made a series of very serious commitments to the government about making sure that we see more children and families, that the outcomes for those children and families are better, and that they actually focus on the needs of the individual child. And so all of the elements come together to do that, to enact the legislation, and also additional dollars to make our systems more responsive. And the third part of Safe Home for Life is building on some work that was started under the Wood Special Commission in 2008, which was called Keep Them Safe. And Keep Them Safe really took us to a place of saying that child protection is not just the business of community services. Child protection is everyone's business. So when we think about the systems, I'll just let people come in and sit down. No problem. So when we think about the systems, we really want to be clear that as much as we are thinking about family and community services as a part of the system, that the system's actually made up of ourselves, our NGO partners, our other government partners, and other private agencies that we're involved in. All together we make the system, not just family and community services as a standalone. So I want to tell you a little bit of a numbers story about the child protection system, because I know there's people in this room from a variety of different backgrounds and probably not a lot from family and community services style agencies. So this is part of the story that we told to government around the $500 million. So this tells the story of the child protection system. These are 12, 13 numbers and they're published numbers. So what family and community services has in the child protection space is a single front door, an intake system that works through a helpline. So one helpline for the state, and every call related to child abuse or child protection comes through that line. So in 12-13, there were 246,000 reports made about children in New South Wales. So these are reports from police, education, health, the NGO sector about children that they're concerned about. And when you call the helpline, what they do is work through a series of steps with you, because what they're trying to work out is the child you're calling about at risk of significant harm? And that's an acronym that you'll hear quite a bit about, and it's ROSH, risk of significant harm. What New South Wales is actually very, very good at is reporting, because 246,000 reports is double that of the other states, and it tells you something about the system. The thing that really stands out from that number is that 141,000 of those reports were about children who were not at risk of significant harm, but where agencies, police, health, education or NGOs had a level of concern. So it says to me something about the ability of our partner agencies to sit with and to hold risk. These are not the children that we want to draw into the system. These are the children that we want to find alternate services for. So of the 246,000 reports, 104,000 reports were about children who are at risk of significant harm. Again, a huge number. This translates to 64,000 children. So there's many children that we get multiple reports about, or children that get reported in our system who are actually already in the statutory system themselves. The number that should stand out the most and really goes to our commitment of the $500 million and goes to our commitment about really changing our services and our systems is that of the 64,000, we saw approximately 18,000. So we saw 26% of the children where the system has already said these children are at risk of significant harm. The number's not big enough. That's not a good enough response. And so that's why our commitment to the government through the Safe Home for Life process is that we will see more children and families. But we're not just interested in building more system. Actually, what we want for those children is better outcomes. So I want better communication with our NGO partners to say, how do you stay in contact with this family so that they get a continuum of service, and that the statutory agency ourselves do what only the statutory agency can do. As you see, the service flows through to the Children's Court, and that we take each year 3,000 children, approximately 3,000 children into care. Into foster care, into kinship care, but where the court has actually said these children can no longer live with their families. We have about approximately 73 to 75 children adopted from the out-of-home care space each year. Adoption is certainly something that you'll see quite a bit about in the media. But really, in a way, it forms quite a small component of the work that we do, but does offer some very particular permanency options excuse me, for a number of children in our system. And then each year we have about 1,300 kids who leave our care system and go on. What we know about those kids is, again, their outcomes are not commensurate with that of their peers. We know that of a number of the kids who leave care by 19, approximately a quarter of those girls who've left care have had a child of their own. And so what I want to tell you about is a system that is a cycle, but is also one about increasing intensity. The nature of the work that we've done in Safe Home for Life so far is to think, as I said, about the end user design, and we've been working quite a bit about designers and looking at the system. And so what designers tell me when they look at our system is it's incredibly hard to get into. We see 26% of the kids at risk of significant harm. Then once you are in the system, it's incredibly hard to get out of. That the nature of our system pushes kids that are in the system to the intensive end. And that's the things that we want to look about. And designers say to me, their words, where are the opportunities to get off the bus? How do we get out of the statutory system? How do we give kids permanency options that are better than long-term care to 18? So Safe Home for Life is really about more services and better outcomes, and that we see more kids that are at risk. The reason that we that we have a significant ICT component in Safe Home for Life is that for some of our caseworkers, they may spend 80% of their time behind a computer. What we actually need is caseworkers out seeing families, caseworkers out engaging with families in a relational way that is not just about the state intervention, but is about saying, how can this family solve this problem together? So in Safe Home for Life, often when you have a $500 million announcement, what you see is a very big programmatic structure or a very big announcement of funding going to the NGOs. This is not what Safe Home for Life looks like. Actually, what we are doing is, instead of building more and more system, in family and community services, we have more system than I've had hot dinners. We are looking at building a series of initiatives because we want to take the opportunity to prototype, to test, to tweak, to find out what works, to find out that what works in Tari is actually really different to what works in Bega, and take those opportunities to think differently about the different opportunities that we have. So here you see on this slide a whole range of initiatives. We're testing things differently. We're snapping off part of our very significant front door helpline and placing it inside Campbelltown CSC, because we think the opportunity there is to say, when I have a local relationship with a service provider in Campbelltown, that I actually get much better outcomes for kids, because I'm thinking about local solutions and I'm thinking about the family that we both know. We're looking about community-based child protection workers, that we want workers inside schools, and this is the workers saying it to myself, that they want to be in the school, in the high school, on Wednesday and Thursday, because they know they've got a much better chance of talking to the kids that we know are going to be in a DV situation on the weekend. They much prefer to talk to them on a Wednesday and Thursday about safety options than picking up the call at the helpline on the Monday morning when the moment has passed. So these are the sort of opportunities that we're looking at, about getting ahead of the game, looking at making some changes, some diversion and better permanency options. And what we need is a responsive system to take us to this place. These are our objectives, these are our measures. It's about seeing more children. It's about reducing the 57% of non-risk of significant harm reports to come to our helpline that take up the space of 30 full-time equivalent workers just to take those calls. I'd much prefer those workers to be out seeing children and families that need to be seen. We want less kids re-reported and more children, where possible, staying with their families. In legislation for the first time, we say that restoration is the place that we want to put our energy, because where we can work with families, it is much better for those kids, where it is safe to do so, to stay with their families. So you can see all of our metrics there in front of you. So Safe Home for Life is quite a large program of work, and you can see here from the streams of work that our focus has absolutely been on the child protection legislative reform to get ready for proclamation. We've passed that date now, so what we're looking at is then about the embedding. It doesn't stop on the 29th, that wasn't the end of days, it was truly just the start, because all of that work needs to be embedded into our current systems, into our culture of our caseworkers, into our systems that enable our caseworkers. We also have a district-led service co-design stream where we're absolutely working with districts to say that design thinking is where we want to take this agency, that we want to be held to the rigour of the end user, that I want everyone to be not encased in bureaucracy, but instead saying, how does our system impact on this child? What is this child's experience? And so when we learn that the experience of a young child coming into out-of-home care is an 8-year-old girl who says, I know what to do in the morning. I get up and I pack my bag and I eat my breakfast and I get dressed because I need to go back to the community services centre and spend the day there and find out where I will stay tonight. And that is the 8-year-old's experience of coming into care. When people understand the experience, the system responds, and that's what we're looking for. And so, of course, you can see there, stream 4 is the frontline systems replacement stream that we're here to talk to you about today. So I hope I've given you a sense of the context, a sense of the call that we're putting out there to say we're looking for better opportunities and we're going to keep our focus on child and families. So thank you so much.